Hello everyone. I'm Gemma Star and welcome to another episode of Man Speak. Man Speak is an offshoot to our Heart Warrior series where some of our Heart Warriors come back and talk about a particular subject that they're very knowledgeable about and that is close to their heart. And today we have the return of our number 35 Heart Warrior, who is Aaron Schultz. Now, Aaron is he's a former, let me read this. He's a former mental health recovery coach, but more importantly, at the moment, he's a men's health education, promotion, support main person at the Outback Mind Foundation, which is a foundation for men's mental health and support here in Australia. And so he's the founder of that and putting a lot of hard work and energy into promoting men's health. He's also a yoga teacher and very active in his local community. Now, the subject that Aaron has chosen today, well, along with my prompting, is healing men and preventing domestic violence. So we all know this is a subject which is carries a lot of guilt, shame, and silencing around. So I feel it's really important to get it out into the open. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing what Aaron has to say, and hopefully we can touch a lot of men and women as we enjoy this discussion. So thank you for being here. Hello, Aaron, and welcome to Men Speak. You're our number 35 Heart Warrior, and I'm very, very happy to have you back for this show.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. And we're going to have a pretty important chat today, which I hope can reach a lot of people out there.
Exactly. And, you know, this is one that I'm very passionate about because I like to think that I'm healed, but I did have a 10-year abusive relationship and marriage, and that was 20 years ago now, and obviously I'm at this point where I'm helping men, so but I obviously passionate about this conversation and really want to help men and obviously women to be able to understand the mindset, what's happening with men at that point, because that's something I was very naive to at the time and quite stubborn about, which didn't contribute to the situation, and I'm willing to own that bit. So where would you like to start?
Certainly, just flowing on from your comments there, I believe this intergenerational trauma that comes into a man and gets displayed as domestic violence as a form of control. But primarily, I believe we've got a unique moment in time at the moment to be able to help men heal. We don't need to punish more men for this sort of stuff. We need to help them heal and actually realise their emotions and be emotionally mature rather than just sort of reacting and doing things that have consequences. So your particular situation is very common. I've an interest in this, and this has come by default. My mum was a victim of domestic violence on a number of occasions before I come along, not with my father, but with other men, and she only told me about that just before she died. Primarily, she kept it to herself. So I have a genuine interest to be able to try and divert or alleviate episodes moving forward, but also to be able to help those perpetrators that have actually committed offences to be able to heal and become aware of their emotions rather than just going through life and not actually understanding much about themselves. We haven't really been given the tools and the guidance to be able to learn how to self-regulate. And if we can do that, then these episodes will start to decrease. I've got no doubt about that. So in Australia at the moment, there's a domestic violence offence that police get called to every 2 minutes. So it's a major issue. So every 2 minutes, the police are going to an offence, primarily involving women and acts for women. For men against women primarily. Although there are some reverse situations, but not as common as the other. So I do believe rather than having this reactive approach to it, we need to be more proactive and go and do things to help stop offences rather than just continue on the merry-go-round.
Definitely. And of course, if that's every 2 minutes, the ones the police are getting called out to, there's probably 10 times, if not more, the amount going on that they're not getting called out to. Following on from what you were saying, Aaron, and I was thinking about this morning in preparation. Would it be correct to say in the West, at least with our culture, that men never set out with the intention to go this far? And I think this is also a factor that keeps us women in these relationships, because we can see their genuine regret the next day that it took it to that level. What have you got to say around that?
Well, it happens all the time. You know, we don't have the awareness around our emotions to be able to realise where we're at. Whether we're making a poor choice for food, it gives us temporary pleasure, then we regret it. Whether we do an act and we regret it, it's something that we're unconscious of, these emotions and behaviours which, you know, turn into anger or seeking pleasure or whatever that may be. So, you know, the education system and the colonial system that we've been sort of, you know, brought up in, it's really around about fear, force, control, looking outside ourselves for some diversion away from ourselves and our own emotions without actually being man enough to front up to them and observe them and be able to move through the negativity, I guess, at the end of the day. So, you know, we've become very stuck. Although, as I mentioned, I believe we've got a great moment in time to be able to, you know, help this and heal this. This is intergenerational. So, you know, my dad's dad went to war. He drank a lot. That probably got brought into my family, and all this sort of intergenerational behaviour of disconnection is being continued on. So, you know, now I think, you know, having conversations like this will definitely help people start to wake up a little bit and start to do things which can actually help people learn to self-regulate, because that's a skill that we weren't taught. It's a skill that our fathers weren't taught and our grandfathers weren't taught and all that type of thing. So yeah, very, very excited about, you know, this decade and what you know, opportunities arise to be able to help people in this space for sure.
Okay, let's start with this intergenerational thing. Because to be honest, this is the thing that got me out of my relationship. I did it for my boys, what I couldn't do for myself, because obviously seeing, you know, how it gets passed on. So what does growing up in an abusive household where, let's say, predominantly the man is violent towards a boy's mother, what does that do to a boy's psyche?
Pretty much it gives you a blow to the heart. When you get a blow to the heart, it's more powerful than a blow to the body. So when these things happen, they stay there, and this trauma gets stuck in our body. We don't know how to release it, and that comes out in anger or rage or seeking pleasure or abusing someone sexually or whatever type thing. But then we regret this. You know, we do these actions and we regret them. So, you know, it's not that little boy's fault that he observed all this. You know, and it's quite common. I know lots of young fellows that I went to school with that were victims of seeing this sort of thing as they grew up, and that sort of come into their adult lives as well. So really, the first step is to have compassion for that little boy that saw this sort of stuff. You know, rather than punishing them. Last year, I did a lot of work around the Queensland prison system, and I actually spoke to a lot of guys that were in domestic violence related issues, and that was most of them. You know, it's a huge number of men that are getting incarcerated for domestic violence, and you know, just about everyone had circumstances of that intergenerational trauma, you know, happening when they were kids. They saw it a lot, and they just basically act the same way. But they need healing. Those little boys need healing. You know, they need to be able to learn how to, as I said, manage their emotions, but also get this sort of love back and actually find that within themselves that a lot of these learned behaviours were not their fault. And if you can empower a young man or a man to be able to break that cycle, that's actually very uplifting for them. Very powerful for them to know that they can actually make change. And this is the type of, you know, I suppose, pathway we need to start to work towards moving forward, because, you know, there's no point just punishing someone. They get out, they do it again, they keep repeating. And that's very common in the domestic violence space. You know, there's always repeat offenders consistently in domestic violence. And unless we can start to really seriously look towards breaking those cycles, we're not going to see much change, you know.
Yeah, and I mean that just, sort of brought back a reflection on my own case where I think that some of us women we understand that little boy being hurt on a subconscious level, and we want to help heal him, and
Yes.
and that's what we stay in the relationship for as well, to heal that little boy. So I think that's just an important awareness for women to have as well around, the question, why do we stay, which always comes up. Okay, Aaron, I'd like you to lead this conversation to make sure that we go in, a good order and get out what information needs to be gotten out.
Yeah, very interesting. Lots of things are going around in my brain at the moment with regards to this, and I'm using my own experiences too here, just from being a young boy, which comes into the workforce and then has all the stresses of life, laid upon them, and then they've got debt, and you've got all these sorts of things. And fortunately for me, I was never a victim of domestic violence. I never observed it, so I never displayed that sort of behaviour in my own relationship with my wife. But when I think about it, there was probably minor episodes with regards to me not being emotionally aware enough, and then being able to drink alcohol or do whatever to self-regulate unhealthfully, and then your wife cops that. Wife or partner cops that, and a lot of the emotions come out. So, unfortunately, this colonial model that we're in is pretty much, tying us into these negative behaviours and negative emotions. And I feel a lot of compassion for a lot of young guys coming through now to be able to come into this world with all the pressures that it actually provides. So, you think about your ex-partner and your situation. I really understand what you're saying about the lady or the female in the relationship wanting to help that young boy. And I think my wife was very much like that too. But I needed to heal myself, our relationship finished, and a lot of that was my doing, because I needed to sort myself out, primarily. So I split up with my wife, and I said to myself, I'm not having a relationship until I get to know myself better again. So I actually did a lot of work on myself and a lot of inner healing, and through that work, a lot of this trauma and stuff that I've been unconscious of started to come out. And that over time just started to release. And if I hadn't have done that, that would have stayed with me my whole life. And that's sort of blocked me from reaching my potential as a man and as a human, to be emotionally mature enough. And there's a lot of people like me that are in that space. On my podcast, I've interviewed lots of athletes and, professional people, musicians and so forth, but they're masking their emotions by being a performer primarily, and it's no different than being an alcohol drinker or a drug user or whatever. Unless you're brave enough to be vulnerable and actually come out and start to say, look, I need to sort this out. And I believe a lot of this can be done ourselves. We need to do the inner work rather than sort of outsource it. That's great to get some guidance, but you really need to start showing up every day to be able to, be aware of your emotions and where your mind actually is at. And the ecosystem that you're in, like the environment that you're in, whether that's actually affecting your behaviour or not, and being able to sort of find what works for you to keep you in a nice state of flow, so you're not sort of consistently getting knocked out of rhythm. And when you do go into situations where you are knocked out of rhythm, you can actually learn to self-regulate and have that self-control again. I think that's really key and important. We don't really understand our emotional health and the way our mind works, to be able to have that awareness around, where we're at on a certain day and a certain time. I think it's really, really important for a man primarily. But also, I really believe that every man needs to spend time in the morning to be able to get to turn inward and start to feel, their truth and who they really are and their purpose in this lifetime. And if we can start to do that, then all of a sudden we go into the day a little bit more self-aware rather than sort of being reactive, but more proactive. I just think, for me personally, that's been the biggest thing for me, to be able to, get that time in the morning to be able to get balanced and grounded, and then you know where your baseline is throughout the day. See, in modern society, we're just getting thrown out of rhythm consistently, and I just think it's more important than ever to be able to do these practices that actually help us find that rhythm again.
Yeah, and we'll get into those practices in detail later on in the show. I think at the moment it's good to just have an overview. Now, something that came to mind too is that we've been talking about physical violence, but of course, well, there's emotional abuse and mental abuse, which often all three come together, as was in my case. Can you, for clarity, can you please clarify what emotional abuse is and what mental abuse is?
Certainly, if you have concerns about your partner, you're checking their mobile phone, you're doing all these things to keep an eye on them primarily. Which is look, it's a very, very touchy one, because if you're in a relationship, you want to make sure that your relationship's flowing. And if you are curious that something might be going on, then these sorts of behaviours come up. But I don't think that's the right method. I think it's best to actually be man enough to talk about things with your partner and do things that way. So the emotional side of things is very, very common. With guys, but as I said, we don't actually understand our own emotions to be able to understand that in someone else. So a key thing to a relationship, I believe, is you've really got to know yourself before you actually can be congruent with another person, because that's our biggest fault. We're actually looking for something in someone else, but we're not actually connected with ourselves. And I just think that's the sort of stuff we need to start to learn more of in the future, so we don't necessarily make the right decisions, but relationships sort of come together more effortlessly rather than through force. And when things are out of balance in a relationship, that emotional side of things for a man is very, very common, because we're not actually aware of our own emotions, and we're actually trying to search for something in someone else to try and sort something out within ourselves. But the best way to do this is actually speak about it and be open enough and trusting enough in a relationship, so you can be able to communicate effectively rather than sort of go behind someone's back or whatever that may be. And lots of relationships with guys, a lot of men do the dirty on their partners, that type of things to help them feel better. You look at sex, for example. That's usually great for the first part of a relationship, then it sort of dies off, and then a man will go and chase that in someone else. And obviously that has consequences as well, but that all comes back to that self-regulation and managing your emotions as well, as I mentioned before. And being able to have those conversations about these sorts of things, I think, is really important with your partner as you evolve through life. I think that's for sure.
Definitely. And what have you got to say around mental abuse? What does that entail?
Can you just give me your, I suppose, ideology of mental abuse, because it sort of crosses over with emotional abuse as well.
Yeah. Well, like insults, criticism, always putting a person down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. It's a lack of insecurity within the individual that's actually doing those behaviours or performing those behaviours. In its essence, or insecurity, I should say. So a man is, labelling and starting to judge and use these criticisms on someone else to belittle them, to basically help themselves feel a little bit better temporarily. So for me personally, if I come across that in a man, I'll actually confront them and ask, where those behaviours are coming from, and try and arrest that as quickly as possible. But no woman needs to be or deserves to be spoken to or belittled in that manner. That's for sure, and it's still very common, unfortunately. But again, that still comes back to this intergenerational type stuff with what Dad did and those sorts of things, and the domination in a relationship. The domination in a relationship should not be like that at all. It should be equal. It should not be one higher than the other. And unfortunately, for a lot of guys, we come into a relationship where we think we're more powerful because we're the breadwinners primarily, and it's not the right attitude to have. That's for sure.
Yeah, I probably got confused with verbal abuse. So anyway, but as you said, it's all interrelated. Interrelated. And it's interesting what you said then. Like, I was brought up in a home where my parents were always very respectful to each other. I mean, they had the odd argument, but even that was, was never got really dirty or, really belittling or Yeah, vulgar. So, I'm happy to keep my relationships that way. But obviously, if you're with someone who has been brought up in a home where things did get, dirty and, dirty fighting, it's obviously something completely new to be able to fight respectfully.
For sure, and you're showing your age now by using that word vulgar, because that doesn't get spoken about very often. But I do like it. Mine use that word quite a bit. Hey, I'd like to know a bit about your situation. Obviously, you observed a nice relationship coming through, but you obviously chose a partner which was abusive. Did you just put up with that? Is that something that you just observed going along and thought, oh well, I deserve this? It's interesting to hear a woman's perspective on that type of thing.
Yeah, no, I knew I never deserved it, but for some reason I had this sort of, because I always believed that if you got married forever. And that wasn't anything religious. That was just my little romantic heart.
Mm.
And so, work through the bad times. But I always thought, and I've said this before, the love of a good woman will change him, will save him, will cure him. And it's this recognizing this, that it's not the actual man you fell in love with that's doing this, it's the wounded child. And so, if we can only heal that wounded child by loving him enough, by forgiving enough, and then, of course, all I ever wanted to be was a mother. So, I mean, that the children didn't come along until halfway through our relationship. But, obviously by then, it's not that I thought the children would fix it, but I guess it was just my little fantasy of, happy families, or, I'll do whatever it takes, to have these children and be a mother. And so, yeah, a lot of contributing factors there. And I can remember the first time it happened, and part of me said, oh my God, that's it. Because I always said, I would never, ever be in an abusive relationship. A man would only have to hit me once and that would be it. And in fact, when I was about 18, a man spat in my face in a club, and I went and reported him because I was not going to be taken that action at all. And then, so I would never have imagined I would have got in an abusive situation. But yeah, it's just that I think once you fall in love with the man and you see the good times and the loving times and the times that make you feel good, because as you know, it's a cycle. Even though the mental and emotional abuse might happen on a daily basis, maybe the physical doesn't. And so, when he does apologize and feel remorse, you want to be that forgiving. And I am was always a genuinely loving, accepting, forgiving person. So it was easy for me. But yeah, that's pretty much my take on my situation.
Do you know now why those behaviours occurred? Was it something to do with regards to the job that he was doing and the stress that he was being on board, or was it something more to do with him replaying behaviours which were, I suppose, exposed to him as a young man?
Yeah, I mean, he never got into any specific trauma that he went through as a child, but obviously I had my suspicions. And in all privacy, I'm not going to, go into anything else here about him. But so yeah, definitely childhood wounds. And, meeting his family. And, he was from North America, so he had an Islamic background, Muslim background, wasn't a particularly practicing Muslim, but, obviously within that culture, the North African culture, which at the time, it's a bit stricter now, but was semi-strict, let's say, especially in the more rural areas. So yeah, I got to spend a lot of time with his family over there, probably a year all up. And his father was the same. So obviously I could see it was a intergenerational pattern.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for sharing. And this is the big thing we're going to do as men. This is why I do the men's circles, and I want to expand on this more and more, is to be able to help that person or that man actually understand the inner child and be able to, go into that and start to move through that and find that acceptance with other men as well. You think about what we've seen. I'm a 50-year-old now, and I've seen a lot of change over my lifetime. A smooth transition. I've gone from a simple life as boys to a world which has been backflipped, many times. And there's a lot of uncertainty and that within it all. So I just think for us to be able to share more as men and to be able to dive into these sort of situations and vulnerabilities more and more is so important, because it's something that I suppose as a group can be done much more effectively. And also, as I mentioned before, that work needs to be done personally. But if we're all able to do this together, because just about every one of us out there have had something go on in our life which has held us back, and to be able to sort of move through that, I think it's our birthright to do so. We didn't come into this world to be able to embody a lot of the traumas that we've had to experience. I just believe we've got the ability to be able to shift that if we're brave enough to do so. And not so much man up, because I don't like that word. I just think it's important for us to be able to confront difficult situations, to be able to move forward and thrive in this lifetime.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of levels here, isn't there? There's the level that we're talking about here that's we see very much on let's say in the third dimensional realm, and people would often see it as victimhood. Personally, I don't like the word victim. I never saw myself as a victim, even when I was in the situation, because I got to I guess I did a lot of reading and a level of awareness and consciousness that I could see it, more as a soul agreement. And I'm not saying this is an excuse, but it definitely gives us a reason, because if I hadn't been through what I'd been through, I don't think I'd be here now. So I see him as my greatest teacher. We're probably going way off track, probably not ready for this conversation, but
no, you're not. I think it's important, and that's the thing, because we've gone through what we've gone through to be able to get us to this situation now. If we hadn't have done that, then this wouldn't be happening. It wouldn't be helping people out there. But primarily, this is really important, because the clinical model that we're sort of experiencing around mental health is probably not really working that well. I just believe the lived experience model is so much more powerful to be able to help, educate around, certain situations that an individual's been through, so people can be more aware. I remember when I was a young boy, at 15, I was not going down the path that I wanted to go down, because there was no options for me to be able to be connected to what my heart was telling me I wanted to do. So I had to, go through all this soup of challenging behaviours and risky behaviours. But primarily, I got a strong voice when I was 15 to say, you've got to do this so you can come out the other side to help others, And I didn't know how long that was going to take, but eventually it did. And, I had to go through all that to be able to get to where I am now. And I know lots of women that are in the situation that you, or have had situations that you've been in, that are actually doing some great work to be able to help other people out there. Not so much in the domestic violence space, but just in the humanology space, to be able to help empower and improve humanity at the end of the day. And as I mentioned before, guys that are committing these offences, I just don't believe that we need to keep punishing. I think we've got to interrupt that and be able to work one-on-one to be able to heal these men, because, there's no point just trying to, go around in circles with this sort of stuff. I know when I can have a heart-to-heart conversation with a man, whether that be a young man under the age of 25 while their brain's still developing, or someone a bit older, to be able to confront them, or not so much confront them, but confide in them and have them confide in me, man to man, heart to heart. That's when they start to shift, and if you can help them learn how to be a bit more emotionally mature and emotionally aware, that's when we can start to make these changes. So next time they're triggered, maybe they can actually do it a little bit differently rather than reacting.
Yeah. Okay. So I took that way off track for whatever
reason.
Okay. I really want to make sure we get all the information out in this talk. So let's start with, okay, so a man's watching and he is aware that obviously, he is abusive. And can you just talk directly to that man, where he can start? What's the first couple of steps he needs to take?
So, if you're in a situation and you're finding yourself becoming elevated or escalated, being able to notice that first and foremost is really, really key and important. And, look at the choice you have for turning left, which is easy, which is being reactive. confronting it and dealing with it physically or abusively or whatever that may be, that's easy, but really a man needs to be able to arrest that, walk away, go and do what they need to do to be able to get this calmness back in themselves again, rather than react. Be proactive rather than reactive. And these are the skills that we don't have, because it's easy to react. It's easy to go for a beer. It's easy to go and do these things which our weak mind will take us to. When we start to turn the corner and start to build some resilience and self-awareness, so we can actually start to put the brakes on and turn the corner, so we don't actually make a choice which will deliver consequences. And that takes work, mate. If you're a man listening to this, you're going to have to do some work on yourself to be able to come to this. And I'd really suggest, do something which challenges you. If you're not doing things that challenge you, you're not going to be able to make these changes. You've got to do something consistently or on a daily basis where you're challenged, because that'll actually improve your self-awareness. If you can do that, and all of a sudden when you're confronted with a situation, you are able to make a better decision, which will maybe not take you down the path of consequences at the end of the day, because that's not what we need more of. We need more guys who can actually start to take control of themselves and start to learn to progress in this lifetime, rather than sort of take their life in this weakness, in this continuous cycle of weakness, which we experience consistently, So yeah, you've got to be able to challenge yourself on a daily basis, so you can actually start to have your awareness heightened to another level. Otherwise, you're going to keep going around in circles. And I've been there. I know what it's like, and I know this is the only real way to be able to arrest it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do the men talk about the build up before let's say an incident of physical violence? Like, obviously, it doesn't, very rarely happens just at a snap like that. And I mean, in retrospect, there is the build up. And I know my ex used to say to me, if you could just stop then. But at the time, I was so young, I felt that as a suppression. And, I didn't want to be suppressed. So I would keep talking, and but there must be that build up when the man feels that inevitably, if this continues, it's going to end in violence. Is that the case? Are they aware of that build up?
They're not aware of it. Absolutely not. That's the thing. A lot of it has to do with the ecosystem we're in, as I mentioned, the time of the month that actually is, believe it or not. Our emotions can be heightened at different types of the month. What's triggered us to be able to bring that into the family setting or the environment that we're actually going into? Do we really want to project these behaviours onto others? If you can walk into a calm room and then your behaviour starts to change that, then you've got to realise that that's your fault and that's your problem. So to be able to calm yourself down before you go into a certain situation is challenging. But these are the things that I've mentioned. You've got to be able to really confront yourself regularly so you can make that shift and that change. I go back to my own situation when I was married and younger. I'd come home from work, quite stressed and worn out, and my family would cop that, but it wouldn't be so much through words; it'd just be through my energy. My energy would be just really deflated. If I was able to do something back then that could help regulate that, then they'd get a better version of myself, which wasn't showing up in those situations. And no family deserves to cop that. Particularly kids. No kids need to experience, a man's emotional imbalance. Unfortunately, it is part of our makeup. We will go up and down. That can be seen as anxiety or depression, but if we can start to learn to get this balance back more consistently, then we're going to display behaviours which are more proactive rather than reactive at the end of the day.
Yeah, how is it that, what impact does a man going to work during the day and coming straight away home to his family, where often the wife is stressed, even if she's staying at home with the children, because that's hard work, if just having kids on you all day. I don't know if it was you or someone else I was talking to in the Heart Warrior series, and they said just take 10 minutes in between leaving work and coming home and going and sitting on a piece of grass, or just having that 10 minutes just to recalibrate your mind.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was me, but primarily being able to get grounded again is so important. You go from a stimulated, stressed environment into a car, into traffic, into your house, you're not showing up too well, are you? But if you can just get away from that, go to a park, get your feet in the ground, go to the beach, go to a river, whatever, that 10 minutes can have a huge impact on your life, not just for that particular moment, the hours that follow that, but in general. So getting grounded is so important. You look at modern society and how we're being denatured consistently. As I said, that's not our fault, this sort of stuff. We've been thrown into this environment which is denaturing us consistently. We've got to be able to get away from technology, away from stimulation as much as possible to find this balance again. And you look at a man that is either going to work, sitting on their backside behind a screen, and then going into a vehicle, and then into a car, and then into home, or a guy that's on the tools or whatever that may be. They're not actually like in this nice, calm environment, which is actually helping them, feel balanced. So we've got to do this stuff. It's part of our responsibility as men to be able to learn how to do this proactively and self-regulate. They'll always try and get us to go to the bottle shop on the way home. You're always going to see signs to go and drink beer and how good that's going to make you feel. Well, yeah, maybe it will temporarily, but eventually you're going to have consequences with that. And the body is smarter than you. Your body's always going to give you a kick up the arse consistently. We're going to be able to learn to work with it rather than against it. So the cheapest option is to get your shoes off, get on the ground, and start to just get that self-regulation back. And that earth energy, that healing is really profound. That's what we actually need to do more of. So after we finish this conversation today, that's exactly what I'll be doing. I'll be going outside and just getting the sun on the body and the feet on the ground, because it actually just helps me to learn to calm down. Not so much calm down because I'm not going to be stressed after this conversation, but just getting back to a nice balance again, back into a nice rhythm. I think that's the sort of stuff that we needed to learn at school rather than, times tables and that sort of shit.
Yeah. And I mean, here in Australia, it's quite a culture, isn't it, to have a beer after work for men?
Terribly. Absolutely it is. Yeah. Yeah. But, it's not our fault again. Alcohol primarily is a disruptor, and it's been developed by design because it actually blocks our consciousness. Being able to be aware of how it actually makes you feel and not keep ignoring that, I think, is really important. Yes, it is great to be able to have a beer sometimes and communicate with others and be, I suppose, collaborative and proactive. But at the same time, just realise what it does to your sleep, what it does to your body, and that type of thing, and use it wisely. I always say, you control alcohol, don't let it control you. And unfortunately, they're trying, and I'll use the system and the colonial model is trying to disempower us and denature us consistently. Bet, drink booze, gamble, and eat junk food. All the stuff that actually makes you unhealthy. Because once you're unhealthy and you're unconscious, and you're controlled. If you're conscious and you're actually aware to be able to look after yourself proactively, then you can contain yourself. You can start to do things which are empowering rather than disempowering. And this is the point we've actually come to in humanity, where people are starting to realise this now, just how disempowered by design we've actually been. And as I said, that's not our fault. So, guys that are listening to this, please do some things to empower yourself, because, no one's going to do it for you. You've got to do the work yourself.
So are you saying, okay, it's not a man's fault that the system is the way it is, but it is his responsibility to navigate that system and take his mental health and emotional well-being into his own hands?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, for sure. No one's going to do it for us, or no one's going to take us on that journey within the systems that we're in. We're actually being taken the other way. Because we have to say, right, I'm not going to follow this anymore because it's not working for me. I need to be able to divert this. Whatever age you're at, it's never too late to be able to shift things and to be able to do things that can help you. Be empowered, start to empower yourself. That's something that's within all of us. It's our birthright to actually be living in in a state of harmony, you know, and a calm, natural state. That is our natural way of being. We're not meant to be stressed, tense, anxious, you know, depressed, all these sorts of unnatural, I suppose, emotions. You know, yes, they are there for a reason. You know, stress is there for a reason. You know, they're there to help us. But when that mindset consistently, we're actually being disempowered. You realise disempowering, you'll start to eliminate them slowly from your life, and you'll start to unwind all the things that are holding you back.
Okay, so would you advise any man in this situation to cut out alcohol to be able to control his alcohol, even if it's just, and here in Australia, it's so like, oh, it's just one a day, or it's just a couple of beers, and yeah, they might say couple, but it's 3 or 4, but it's a daily thing. And I mean, you know, that is, in my book, being an alcoholic.
It is. That's right. You're relying on it, and it's easy. You know, it really is easy. It's an easy self-regulator because it'll give you that temporary half an hour to, you know, feel this nice rhythm again. But then your body will kick you up the arse, as I said, and you'll start to, you know, start to shift. Your kidneys and your liver are much smarter than you are. You know, they'll always give you feedback. We're actually got to learn to listen to that feedback. So yeah, don't disregard alcohol. You know, use it wisely and use it for you rather than have it work for you. So allow it to work for you rather than you work for it primarily, because, you know, I was disempowered and taken down that path, whereas alcohol solved the problem. My mum used to say, "I everything." That's what my mum used to say. You know, so she'd have a few beers every night, and so would my dad. But you know, that probably wasn't the best education that I could have had as a young man, you know, growing up. So I had to unlock a lot of those, you know, teachings myself, you know, which can be challenging, but I had to confront them. Otherwise, I'd just keep, you know, keep on that same journey.
And I mean, it's also the cost of alcohol. And I mean, a lot of families are stressed about financial issues. How much would you say that an average man spends on alcohol a week?
I would say without doubt $50 to $100 quite easily. You know, statistics show that. So particularly in blue collar environments, you know, where I live, primarily alcohols are, you know, very relied upon. You know, we could have made huge progress in this space while COVID was on, to be able to, you know, help people relieve reliance on alcohol, but you know, geez, most businesses were shut. The bottle shops were still open. So what's that telling you? And at the same time, domestic violence went through the roof.
So tough, so tough. Okay, so I'm interested to break down the process of the half an hour before a physical abuse happens. And I know we touched on it, but I want to know if you can talk to the man about the moment he needs to, walk away? What does he need to do to prevent that situation? Let's talk about the home environment, when an argument can start and, you know, inevitably it gets louder. And at what point, what does he have to do to prevent that from happening? Okay, let's talk about what he has to do. And also, I'm not going to forget what the women's responsibility is.
That's right. So let's just use this as an example. So the guy's calmed down. He's gone and taken his shoes off, and he's done all the right things when he gets home. When he gets home, his wife's amped up. You know, he's trying to remain in that space, but his wife's just layering it on, layering it on, layering it on consistently. You know, and that happens. You know. But yeah, look at the situation. Like a wife with a lady with 3 kids is probably one of the hardest jobs in the world too. So, you know, in that particular situation is to be able to remain calm. Maybe if you have kids in the household, take them out of the household and start to do things with them, so it gives the wife a break. Otherwise, if you stay in that environment, then the chances are things will become elevated and escalated, and then you start to go bang and you react, and you know, things happen, and you know, that usually leads to I suppose consequences, or, you know, further turmoil down the track. So yeah, it can be quite challenging in that type of situation, in that environment. But yeah, I just think if we can start to see where we're starting to be wound up, to be able to remove ourselves from that situation, and that can take time. So if you're starting to, as I said, wind up mentally, to be able to get out of that environment, it might take, half an hour to an hour and a half to be able to just get back to this calm balance again. And these things can be tough and challenging, for us to do. But I think eventually, if we start doing this, then the better outcomes will come. Sometimes they may not come. So sometimes that relationship might need to have counselling or be addressed because, it may not be the right relationship to be in, and it might not improve. So it's always good to have mediation if these sorts of things are happening consistently, be able to help have a third party be able to help you figure out, where things may be going wrong and be able to give you a pathway and get you on track again. Because, when it's a relationship, between a man and a woman primarily, we don't actually, have that extra person there to be able to give us guidance when things may be fractured. I think that's really important as well. Also, couples coaching is very important. So the man and the woman don't feel, outnumbered and dominated. I think couples coaching is great because, the man gets to have his say with another man. The lady gets to have her say with another woman. Then you can come together and start to massage things and move it out and move through things. And I just think that's the sort of stuff we need to do moving forward to be able to, help save relationships. No one gave us a Bible on how to be a husband or how to be a father or any of that sort of stuff. There was no real pathway or script around that, so we've got to figure that out ourselves. But to have someone come in and mediate for you when things may be out of whack, I think that's really important. It's brave to be able to offer those things up to your partner. Usually it's the lady that actually says, I think we need counselling. Well, how about the man says, perhaps we need to go and get straightened out here. And that can be confronting and challenging, but I think once you actually do that, it can just help you, get some clarity around things in your relationship moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, it always comes to me when people talk about, people going to counselling, that often a lot of couples either can't afford it or it's probably not their priority. Now, but then it came to me, that $100 that they, on average, they spend on alcohol a week. If you're really interested in saving your relationship, it's a win-win, isn't it? You stop spending the money on alcohol and put it towards counselling. While we're on it, because it's important I don't forget, are there, and I know you can probably only talk about Australia, but what are there any free counselling services that men and women can access here?
Yeah, there is. So TAX is really good. That's a free counselling service for men primarily. But I always say you get what you pay for. Right. So certainly finding that time or those dollars to be able to invest in yourself, the return on investment will be significant. So you've got to really honour your self-worth and actually see what can come back from this for you without actually going into it with what's in it for me. Have the mindset of just being completely open and vulnerable, and then everything will come back in spades. I just think we're quick to look for the free and easy option, but sometimes it actually is very, very empowering to be able to have skin in the game and commit to getting someone to give you that support. And you will find the money, I've got no doubt, or talk to someone that may be able to help you, that's had the lived experience that you're going through, a coach or a counsellor or whoever that may be, and then be able to have a conversation around, can we pay for this over a period of time, whatever that may be, and 9 times out of 10 they will help you. There's no doubt about that. So I just think if you've got emotions that are taking you down the path of potential domestic violence or whatever that looks like for you, look at who may be able to help you that may have been there before, and then be able to work out a plan and move forward. And I just think that's the type of stuff we need to be able to do more and more of, to be able to help empower ourselves and move forward. Otherwise we just stay stuck consistently.
Yeah, and that link will drop below in the description of the free service as a either starting point or last resort for someone who really needs to talk to someone, and I'm sure, if you've got any other links, and also your organization, what does your organization do for men in this situation?
Yeah, so we're more of a proactive educator. So it's all about helping guys understand emotional maturity, emotional regulation, just through self awareness and self regulation practices that can help us get back to balance again. So we do that. We do domestic violence education, so go into the workplace and actually talk about what we've been talking about today. With groups of guys, you might go to a mining site and there might be 30 or 40 guys there. I can guarantee you that probably 10 or 15% of them have offended before. So look at situations, why these situations are occurring. You can tell the ones that are sitting there with their arms crossed, that are quite blocked, and they're blocking themselves. But usually after a period of time, they start to open up and listen. So, to talk about that sort of stuff, I think is really proactive. And that's what I believe we need to do more of, rather than wait till an offence happens or someone's broken. Actually give them the tools to be able to support themselves before, they get to that stage. So that's what the Outback Mind Foundation is all about. It's around this empowerment and being proactive around our physical and mental well-being, and not just be a victim to the system, which may not be serving us as well as what it possibly could. So doing that and actually having vulnerable conversations with other men in a circle environment where we can start to dive into that that inner child type stuff and start to really figure ourselves out, I think is what it's all about, rather than just keeping suppressing it. It's amazing when you challenge yourself, as I said before, how much of this stuff comes up. It's been stuck there from when you were a little boy. It just arises, and that's the only way I believe you can actually start to move through things and start to heal that inner child and have those conversations with those inner child, or that inner child, to help them understand a lot of that stuff that they saw was not their fault. So I'll give you a situation. My grandfather died when I was 11 or 12 on Christmas Day, and we actually might have been a little bit old, I'm not sure, but anyway, the family went to the hospital. Everyone looked at his body. I looked at his body. Everyone was getting hugged and confided, and I was on my own. So I had no one confiding in me. And I basically, when we went back to the gathering after the event at the hospital, I could have walked home and no one had even, wondered where I was. And that stayed with me for a long time. That feeling of abandonment, I guess that's probably pretty much what it was. And it wasn't until I started to work on myself that this sort of stuff started coming up. And subconsciously that was there. It was being suppressed consistently. So I was able to recognise that and actually say to myself, "It's not your fault, mate. And it wasn't my fault. My mum was comforting her sister and her brother and all that, but I was forgotten about. That's okay. I get that now. But at the time, it was very hard for a young adolescent boy to deal with, And that sort of stuff is pretty common with most guys out there that had something going on in their life, which was really a blow to the heart, as I said, which can stay there consistently unless we're able to recognise it and start to heal it internally and start to move on from those situations which have held us back. Gemma, I've lost you. I can't hear you.
So sorry, I'm muted for my dog. Okay, so
all right. I missed that whole bit.
Yeah. Okay, so what I was saying is that how important is it for a man to talking about this intervention between when the anger's boiling up in a man and he actually lashes out at his partner. If he had a safe space to retreat to, like whether it's his car or if he doesn't have a spare room or a shed or a garage, a cupboard, something that he can retreat to, and his partner, wife, letting him go there without, following along with verbal abuse. Is that viable? Would that work?
Absolutely. Look, every man needs to have a cave of some sort, and that's pretty hard for a lot of men that are living in an apartment somewhere or whatever, But one thing we've always got is our breath. We can actually just disconnect somehow and connect with our breath. This is why breathing is so important to be able to help this self-regulation, as I mentioned. So it's one thing to breathe, but it's another thing to breathe consciously. If you can breathe consciously and start to get blood flowing between both hemispheres again, then all of a sudden you can start to calm down. And, just because the other person's wound up doesn't mean that you have to be as well. So these are the skills that we need to learn more as guys to be able to help us, and help it work with us, help these things work with us. So that might sound confronting and challenging for someone, but at the same time, unless we do these confronting and challenging things, then we're not going to change too much, So breath work is so important for men, primarily where we're wired differently than women. Our cortisol levels, shoot all over the place. Women go through menopause. I believe men go through menopause between 40 and 55. So there's all these regulation things that go on as well. Connection with the breath is really important to be able to sort of, okay, I can control the situation here by controlling my breath. Try and remove yourself from a situation or an environment as much as you possibly can, and get into a space where you can start to learn to find that calm again. I think that's really, really key and important.
Yeah, go from being reactive to being responsive.
That's right. Yeah, proactive rather than being reactive, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for these men who are very reactive, because it's often hand in hand, isn't it? How can they, apart from breathing, what's the mental process, or like that they can stop being so reactive and become more responsive to life in general?
So getting back to the grounding practices that we need to do every day, I think are super, super important, more now than ever. These ancient traditions of humanology, these experts of being a human, which were always there thousands of years ago, like Jesus is one of them. There's plenty of others that are actually have been conscious. They all say that doing this sort of stuff every day is part of what we need to do as humans to be able to get back to this rhythm and harmony within ourselves again, So it's a must. I really believe we've got to find time every day to be able to tune in. We can find that time to tune in every day, then we're starting to go into the world with more awareness, rather than actually getting to a stage where we're being triggered and so forth. So if I find myself in a situation like that, in general, whether it be with a woman or whether it be just anyone in modern society and life, I immediately feel compassion for them and the compassion for their behaviour, because they haven't done the work that I've done to be able to get them to the stage where they can start to have that awareness, I guess, primarily. So that their behaviour is coming from a place and a space, and you can usually figure out, once you've done the work yourself, where that behaviour is coming from. And what's actually going on for that individual. So to be able to keep balance and keep calm through situations which are triggering is really self-empowering within ourselves. And these are the teachings that Jesus and all these other wise people were trying to show us and teach us, because that's the type of stuff we need to do as humans. And I can tell you now, Bill Gates isn't doing this sort of stuff. Scott Morrison isn't doing this sort of stuff. All these decision makers aren't doing things which actually get them back to their heart and back to the functionality of being human again, at the end of the day. But we've all got the ability as men to be able to do that and empower ourselves, because no one's going to do it for us.
So good. Thank you. Okay. So, I know this is man to man, men, you with men talking to men in our audience, but I know a lot of women watch this as well. Now, what is a woman's responsibility in this situation?
Geez, that's a really beautiful question, and one that I still I'm trying to figure out in many ways, but certainly, what you touched on before is so important too, to be able to, try and help that man, nurture that man, love that man. But firstly, that man has got to learn how to love himself. And I think the most empowering thing that a woman can do is help that man figure out how to love himself. Before I say I love you, you first must understand I. And if that love can come from someone else, then they've obviously got something within themselves which is pretty powerful and beautiful, but they need to actually acknowledge that. So the hardest thing for men primarily is to be able to have self-love and self-respect and self-awareness, because we're always trying to beat ourselves up and be critical of ourselves. That's part of our makeup. That critical mind is there to protect us at the end of the day, but sometimes we've got to learn to let go. Once we learn to let go and surrender, then we can start to open ourselves up to our truth and our potential at the end of the day. So, for a woman, geez, for me, with regards to, a beautiful woman coming into my life or being part of my life, they've got to completely complement me as a person. So my journey can be best it can possibly be. And also I can help that person help complement them to be the best they can possibly be. And then you've got this beautiful intertwined relationship, which is actually thriving, and it's really working well. But sometimes men need this compassion. They need that support, because that self-doubt, that self-critical mind creeps in. So to be able to listen to us is really important. My wife used to shut me down quite a bit, and not actually listen to what I had to say, and that caused a lot of frustration. I think that's pretty common in a lot of relationships, but also for us guys, we need to learn to listen to the lady in our lives as well. I think that's really really important, and we don't actually have that listening skill. It's not something that we've been able to develop well. From being a switched-on man that's performing and earning money and doing all these things, we don't actually listen because we're too caught up in our own world. We've got to be able to be more compassionate and learn how to get out of this back to this more, sink into the heart more, and that's when we can start to open ourselves up and listen. So I believe it's really important in a relationship. Certainly if there's a lady watching this, to be able to listen to your man and provide him with that love and tenderness and support that he actually needs, because he does need it, but also to be able to help him figuring himself out so you can get that back in return as well. I think it's really, really powerful and important.
Yeah, I hear that. It's what comes to me is that, see, once a man hits a woman, you lose respect for him. And even if you stay with him, you've never got the full respect. And so, again, listening to a man generally requires respect from a woman. And once you've lost that whole dynamic disappears. It's where, and I can remember my situation, him coming up with ideas of how we could, again, stop this before it reached the point, of impact, and at the end of the day, I'd lost respect for him by then. And so it's tricky. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, interesting one. It's no different than someone that cheats on someone and then the partner keeps going back and forgiving them and that type of thing. I don't think that can really be forgiven. Sometimes it does work, but most times it doesn't. It's interesting. If you can have compassion for the individual if they've made a mistake, for them to be open enough and be honest enough to be able to work on themselves and figure that out, and be able to front up to that consistently and feel I suppose the word for it is responsibility for themselves, and be able to sort of stay in that space. I think it's really important. Sometimes we do fuck up, and sometimes that does I wouldn't say deserve another chance, but certainly if it does happen, actually, if you do love the individual in your life help them understand where that behaviour's come from, and then start to get work done on that behaviour. And that might need some clinical support possibly, because it's something that may not have been figured out, like that episode with my grandfather dying. That probably cultivated other emotions moving forward in life, which probably weren't as good as what they possibly could have been, because that hadn't been dealt with. So when something happens, and this is something that we need to do, this is something I learned more around with positive psychology, is when a certain situation happens, actually look at why that behaviour happened and try and dive deep into that inner child possibly, to be able to see where it's come from, and then start to figure that out from that space. I think that's where we need to start to be a bit more clever and savvy around moving forward, rather than sort of dealing with the consequences and then no one benefiting from those results. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you brought up a key point there. I think for us women, once we see that a man is trying to take his responsibility and work on a relationship and not just dismiss the behavior or say it won't happen again and then it does, and repeat that cycle, that makes a difference. So for men to actually step up and start doing something, instead of just saying, oh, it won't happen again, and just, because how many times can you hear that story before even the most unconditionally loving of us, have had enough?
Yeah, and it's probably an act of domestic violence in its essence, because this control thing that we have going on, you think you can go and do something and get away with it primarily. And that's the sneaky little boy underneath us all, which thinks that we can do things and have no consequences. But at the same time, when you forgive someone and then the behaviour is good for a while, but then they do it again. There's a very fine line around that, to be able to, okay, I'm moving on from this relationship because I know this is going to improve. This is not going to improve. And that happens a lot. Although at the same time, I was seeing guys that have fucked up, that have actually fronted up to themselves and really turned the corner, and their relationship with themselves has got stronger. The relationship with their partners has got stronger too. So that can be a beautiful, period of transformation for an individual if it's done the right way. And usually that actually needs support from a third party to be able to help them on a pathway and stay there. Because, our slackness within ourselves can take us back to these negative behaviours quite easily and quickly, but some guys need this mentoring consistently to be able to help us. This is another key thing as well. A lot of us haven't had great male mentors growing up. We haven't had great male mentors in our lives. So you get your ex-partner and his father and so forth. Maybe that wasn't the best pathway for him. I believe we need to have strong male mentors in our life, and sometimes that doesn't come from our family. A lot of the time, it doesn't come from our family, because I look at my dad, beautiful heart-based person, really heart-based person, but he couldn't give me the guidance that I needed to function well in modern society and actually know what it's like to be not so much stoic, but to be able to know your responsibility, rather than just being an economic generator. Know the path to being a beautiful man from teenage years all the way through to your life's finished. To be able to live in that realm of consistency and fluidity, I think is really what we need some support around. So all the ancient traditions always have. The old world, where it was guru, having a guru there to be able to guide you through. That is important, but I believe we can actually be our own guru. We all have the ability within ourselves to be able to do this. It's just a matter of figuring it out and finding it within ourselves. But certainly for a young man and someone coming through that's made a mistake, having some mentoring, I think, is really, really important and key as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you right at the very end if you've got any success stories, so we can go further into that. So I want to talk about jealousy, because I know it stems from insecurity. I mean, I know all that, but that was a major factor in my personal situation from him. Jealousy, if I was even to talk to another man or smile at another man, it was hard. I couldn't even smile for 10 years, honestly, pretty much. But I don't want to get into all that. So like, how does a man deal with jealousy?
It's a really tough one. You think about your situation, being with a partner from that Muslim background. A lot of Muslim women are wearing a covering which only shows their eyes, so another man can't see them. So a lot of that perception is very, very deep. So for him to be able to, portray that onto you was unfair, primarily. But getting back to a Western man's ideology of this sort of stuff, it's so tricky because when you're in a relationship, you don't want to see yourself as ownership or owning or much, loving the other partner so much that they can't have these sorts of things or these sorts of conversations without any concern. So I believe a strong relationship is when you know each other so well, but also, firstly, you know yourself so well that there's no chance of conflict there. Your wife can go away on a footy trip with a heap of guys and come back the same person rather than come back and have some traumatic experiences. So you need to have confidence within yourself, but also confidence from the other person that everything is okay, and that person well enough, but also she knows herself well enough that she will not be tempted to make a mistake. And trust me, this is what used to shit me about guys, and it's still pretty common now, is a guy will try and set himself a challenge to pick up someone who's already in a relationship. And I was never able to function in that mindset. I could comprehend this sort of stuff when I was young. I could see this behaviour in other men, and I just thought it was terrible. And it still goes on, now this ego that drives men to be able to dominate and also have control and so forth, which is very, very false and very, very foreign, at the same time, is not great. So this sort of stuff will come up, but certainly knowing your partner well enough and loving your partner and also loving yourself well enough, these situations won't occur. But it's certainly a problem in modern society, and the more work we can do on ourselves, the less risk will be associated with this sort of stuff going on. I believe, there's no doubt.
Yeah, so important. What time is it? Let's see. What else needs to be brought into this conversation, Aaron, that we haven't touched on?
Certainly, the healing aspect of domestic violence. So, the conversation primarily, was to sort of talk about that. We've certainly talked about the holistic approach to the reasons why this occurs. Now, I reckon next year is going to be a pretty powerful year. We're going to start to see some changes in humanity, and healing people is really where we need to start to work towards and work on. This colonial system, this colonial model that I mentioned before, consistently is not working that well in the modern world that we live in. So to be able to see an individual that's made a mistake, to be able to give them chances to be able to learn how to heal themselves, I think is really important, and investing more in that rather than investing more in punishment that is going to, more than often return to a repeat behaviour is really where things need to go. So I just believe the more conversations that we can have like we're doing today, the more people that are listening to this can actually start to think about this themselves and start to have these conversations with other people, and the more chance we've actually got of addressing an issue like this, because these issues are escalating consistently, as I mentioned. The man or whoever it is that's offending, every 2 minutes the police are that are attending, the police may be having conversations about that situation in the future through prosecution, to be able to send them to someone that can actually help them learn how to heal their emotions rather than punish them for those behaviours. This is where I'd like to see us to get to moving forward into this decade and beyond. And that's a whole new conversation in itself, which needs to be sparked and elevated, because that's where we need to be able to go to move towards healing humanity. So those episodes are decreased. I'm not a statistical person, but I believe those 2-minute events can be 5 minutes and 10 minutes, and hopefully eliminated more and more moving forward, rather than continuing on this cycle of repair it's actually looking at fixing the problem and actually like keeping the problem fixed rather than just, reinventing things. I think that's really, really key. So, from our conversation today, I hope more people start to talk about this. One thing for me personally is I am a healer, and I had to go through my whole life through corporate and all that sort of stuff to figure out that was my purpose. So I had to, I was pulled away from alignment to be able to get to the stage where I'm at now. As I mentioned before, that 15-year-old voice that said to me, like yours did, you've got to go through so you can come out the other side to be more aware and better. I think that was key and valuable. But to be able to, help another man heal is really what I'm here for, I guess, at the end of the day, because we all deserve that. We all deserve the ability to be able to turn the corner and start to actually figure ourselves out more and more, that's where I've got to in my life, and I believe there will be more men like me coming forward in the future to be able to do that. And it's not something that can be probably learned from a book. You really need to be able to walk the path yourself in many ways to be able to help. Have compassion for another individual and maybe walking that path as well to be able to help them, shift that. I think that's really, really key. So we've been stuck in this mindset of the clinical model being the only way for the last, few generations and few decades. I think we're starting to turn a corner now where we can start to utilise some lived experience and some journeys of others which can help, others that may need that healing. And I just think that's where we need to start to move towards moving forward.
Yeah, so good. Thank you, Aaron. Because, of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's also a lot of shame and guilt around this. And this is why, even for the women, it's kept. I never told anyone. People suspected, but, I never told anyone. It's a really tough one because for the women, we know the question we're going to get is, well, why do you stay? So that's the question the woman has to ask herself, and we'll tell ourselves, oh, because we love him, because, we're into unconditional love and forgiveness. But at some point for both parties, men and women, self-honor has to overtake unconditional love. And this is a big part of, I know the feminine path, my path was this, even now, juggling this unconditional love and self-honor, which is a fascinating journey and one that's brought me to here, which I think I'm in a really good balance of. But it's the same for men as well, this self-honor.
And that's not common. And really, you've got to be able to walk the fine line of ego and self-respect. There's a lot of guys out there that look powerful, but really they're hurt little boys underneath. And that ego is self-destructive in many ways. I know whether you read the book that I wrote, I talked a lot about that, like sort of coming out of that.
Sorry, which book?
The book that I wrote called A Wink from a Girl. But basically, I talked about myself coming through that journey of disconnection and then getting into the muscles and all that sort of stuff to transform myself. But really, the little boy underneath hadn't been sorted out. I could have kept building my muscles bigger and bigger and bigger and looking like the Hulk, but I needed to turn that corner and start to, okay, why am I doing this? I need to get this self-worth and self-love back that was once there. I know how to do it already. I just got to refine it again. It was there. It just got stripped away, and that's the challenge for men, I guess. To be able to be a man in this world is to be able to experience the full spectrum of emotions, but to be able to balance them and regulate them. I think it's really key. So you look at the lower levels of emotions, so fear, shame, guilt, greed. A lot of guys are in them consistently, but they're not in love, gratitude, compassion, kindness consistently, So to be able to flip them around, it actually puts the others out, but then also to have pride in the middle of it and courage in the middle of it, but not actually live in that consistently. Now, if you're in pride, You're not actually like allowing yourself to be open to love, kindness, gratitude, compassion, all that sort of stuff, because your ego is too strong. Okay, so to be able to understand that emotion and to be able to balance that with the rest of them is really where we need to be able to get to as men. To be able to open our hearts up more and more rather than our minds and our ego. And this is where we become trapped. And I was in that pride mode because look at how fast I can run, look at how many chin-ups I can do, all that sort of stuff. But the love was never there. The love for myself was never there. So I had to work on that, balancing the yang with the yin, all the things that these ancient traditions, as I mentioned, try and teach us, to have the softness and the hardness as well and balance that, all the women want the tough guy with the big ego and the one that looks good, but usually they're broken little boys at the end of the day that haven't actually been brave enough to do the work on themselves.
Yeah. So, Aaron, let's talk about success stories. In your experience with your dealings with men for however many decades, can you give us a couple of good success stories?
Yep. Yeah, one that comes to mind straight away. For some reason, I have this thing with prisons and incarceration and all that type of thing. I reckon in a past life I might have been there myself, but I managed men in the workforce for over about 20 years. So I used to employ guys and have them work out on sites, mine sites, construction sites, transport, all these different industries. And I always used to see that man in myself, consistently. And one day this guy, Simon, I'm pretty sure his name was, walked into my office and he told me he wanted a job. I said, well, why do you want a job? Straight away, I was in jail. This happened, that happened. All these things, occurred in my life. They've taken me off path. I got into drugs. I started using heroin. Because he was honest with me, I made a phone call. I got him to start on a job the next day. I believe he's still in that role now. That's probably 15 years ago. And, so that's a success story for me, because if I hadn't have done that, if I'd have seen that with ego or judgment, that guy would not have got that chance, and there's a fair chance that he wouldn't be walking this earth now if that hadn't have happened. Because I saw that with compassion, I was able to open up my heart to him and actually help him on a journey which he may not have been on before, has helped an individual, through a pathway and opened a door for him, which has not only helped him, but he's now got kids and, a partner and all those sorts of things, So it's so hard for. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, was that story finished?
Just about, but it's so hard for a man because we're not vulnerable to actually talk about our truth. We'll sit there and we'll just make up stories about stuff. We're going to actually get to the core of why we're there in the first place and why we're actually wanting to try and, achieve an outcome or whatever that may be. This man was very genuine about getting something which could help him, not only financially, but help him find purpose and direction in his life. And we all need to find purpose and direction in our lives, So where I'm at now is to be able to help my other men. And, I sort of intuitively knew that when I was a young fella. And it's sort of taken me to where I am now. But also the challenge for me now is there's no financial support for what I do. I don't actually get any assistance. I don't get industries coming to me, throwing lots of money at me to do this sort of work. So we've held men back in many ways. We're not actually doing much to empower men, where we've used men as vehicles to support the economy primarily. There's been no recognition or support for men to be able to actually live this lifetime, thoughtfully, compassionately and lovingly within themselves. We've disempowered men for generations and generations. And this is where I believe next year and beyond, we've got an excellent moment and opportunity and time to do this. What concerns me is other guys that are coming into this space with ego and what's in it for them. It's not the right attitude. If you want to work in a man's delivery space or to support men, you've got to do it from here, not from here. I see guys popping up as male gurus and male coaches and that consistently, but they're hurt little boys underneath. So if you're one of them listening, do some work on yourself, because you're not going to not just help yourself moving forward. If you do, you can help a lot of other people. you don't do it, you're going to fracture a lot of people out there because you haven't sorted yourself out.
Yeah, good advice. I wonder if you've got a success story that specifically relates to domestic violence.
Yeah, look, I can, well, here's an example. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, I was up in Rockhampton delivering what's called the Love Bites program. So the Love Bites program goes into schools and it actually educates kids between 11 and 14 and 15 and 17 around respectful relationships and how to, I suppose, be respectful for yourself, but also respectful, for a relationship with someone else, and know boundaries and be able to understand those boundaries. So in that training that I did, I brought a lady up from Tasmania, and we actually did this training. Was a guy that was a victim of domestic violence himself when he was young, quite severe domestic violence. So through conversations I had with him previous to this over the last few months, was helped him realise and understand that he's got the ability to be able to help a lot of other people. So he did this training, and now he's able to go out and start to educate more and more into the future for young people. But I believe that he can actually start to go out and do more work with men, because he's actually been on that pathway himself, and he actually understands what he went through and how to be able to arrest that within other men through his own lived experience. So this is a guy that was very shy and very contained within himself and very worried about what other people thought about him. But now he's actually got the ability to be able to transcend his own lived experience with confidence, which could actually help him as an individual, through all he's been through, to be able to not only help himself, but help a lot of others as well. So my purpose moving forward is to be able to do education in the workplace. So I've spoken to Rio Tinto, I've spoken to big companies out there about doing some work with their male-dominated teams around this sort of stuff. And there's still ambivalence. We don't get the financial support about this. So, my vision is for these organisations to be transformational rather than transactional. So I can get guys like Mick in to talk about their lived experience in front of a room of guys. And as I said, if you go to a mine site, there's 40 guys in the room, there's 10 or 15% that are already offending or have offended. If you can help them turn the corner, this is where we can start to see transformational change moving forward. So that story of that individual, I believe there's lots more of them out there. I want to be able to, work more with those guys that have been on that path, or maybe that have offended before, that have actually turned the corner. They can go in and talk about how it was for them and how other individuals can actually start to make those changes. So that's part of my purpose moving forward, in this lifetime, to be able to do more of that, because I think that's what's needed, rather than, saying don't commit, don't offend this, that, and the other. I believe, Ribbon, that's great, but if we can actually give real life stories out there that people can relate to, that'll help make a huge difference moving forward with the rate of offences and improving people's lives, but also families' lives and that out there, more and more ahead. So situations like your own doesn't occur. Now, the other thing is I worked with the COLD community, so cultural and linguistic diverse community. So these are people from other countries that have come to Australia, where domestic violence may be seen as being common in their countries. Now they've come to this country where it's not tolerated. So to be able to provide education to people from, the last course that we ran was a man from China, Nepal, New Guinea, Sudan, 2 other countries. So there were six individuals in this group that were from these other cultures, and to be able to provide education around this not being not only just accepted in Australia, but also not a common human behaviour to be able to do this type of stuff. So having them to be able to learn that awareness and be able to take it back into their own communities, to be able to educate within their own communities, will help break those cycles and the stigma moving forward. And I think that's what we need to do more work on moving ahead. So that probably, it only just come to me then that probably is a success story, because there are a lot of the cultures that are offending. Unfortunately, ones that have come from overseas over the last decade, they're actually still doing those behaviours in modern society here. And again, it's not their fault, because they've seen it consistently throughout their lifetime. also the Indigenous communities as well. That's something that's been probably tolerated within their lifetimes, but I think we can break that cycle more and more moving forward. And I just think, stories like Mix and others that I can connect with moving forward that can actually have the ability to be able to help others that may be in the same situation as them or at risk of offending, potential risk of offending, to be able to learn a little about their emotional maturity and emotional regulation that can help stop offences moving forward. And they will be success stories more and more. So if we have another conversation like this in 12 months, I think we'll probably be able to provide some pretty strong evidence around, some stuff that's actually happened, which has helped to break these cycles. Yeah.
How do those, let's say, foreign men or men from other cultures respond to you saying, look, this isn't something that's accepted in Australia? I mean, cultural, you're talking about thousands of years of cultural.
Yep, yeah. Well, we really, look, the only way I've been able to do it is hit them between the eyes, not physically, but able to say, look, mate, if you do this, is what's going to happen. So maybe it was tolerated there, but if you do this here, you're going to get this. And the problem is their partners are tolerating it. A lot of the time, they're tolerating it. So being able to, provide education for migrant women, that this is not tolerated and accepted in this society, for them to be able to speak up is the first step. And then we can deal with the consequences of the offender later on. But sometimes when this education goes on, if I'm talking to a workplace, there's a couple of people from other cultures there that may continually offend because they mightn't see anything wrong with this. The only other way we can actually do so make some changes to be able to help the receiver of the offence to be able to speak up about this, because it's not acceptable, in any race. I don't believe that's for sure.
Definitely a tough one, because, as I said, one thing for them to go to your very, amazing groups and education, but then behind closed doors, we all know, it's often a different story. Let's wrap up, Aaron, because I'm pretty sure we're on or just over the 90-minute mark. But I did want to ask, in your opinion, let's take it back to a typical domestic violence situation within a married couple. And a man does seek to take responsibility and start his healing journey. What are the chances that he can continue in that relationship and overcome the violence?
If he's already offended?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd say 30-70, so 30%, but they'll need support to be able to do so. So one thing that came to me before we started this conversation was, I believe what the Outback Mind Foundation will do moving forward is set up a support network or support line for anyone that's at risk of offending, so they can call and we can help them divert that. But also on the same page is if someone already has offended, to be able to have that support to be able to stay them, help them on the path of not offending again. I believe that's really, really important, because we can get off track and we can go back to old behaviours and that quite quickly. This is where there's no support financially from government or anywhere like that to be able to help an offender. There's a lot of support for a victim. There really is, and that's very needed. But also, if we can help that offender to not offend again, that's where we're going to start to see change. And that's something I'd like to do more of in the future, but I need assistance to be able to do that. And I just think that's really the only way that we can break cycles, because, if someone has offended and they feel that fire building up again and they're at risk of offending again, well, what can we do to actually stop that? If they've got a buddy or they've got someone that's been coaching them or mentoring them, then the chances of them picking up the phone and speaking to them and not offending is probably quite strong. But also, if they do offend, they're basically they're responsible for that individual that's actually been helping them, because that individual's invested a lot of time in supporting them to not get to that stage. I believe this is where we can start to change the judicial system and so forth too. If someone's offended, if they're able to have someone allocated to them to ensure that they don't offend, and if they do offend, they're actually there to be able to help represent them, to show force or whatever. Great, but also first and foremost, there's no excuse for offending in the first place, primarily. So got to try and work towards alleviating that rather than just accepting it and dealing with it as it happens, I think, for sure.
I want to apologize for my dog today. I accidentally left my sliding door open, so all the little lizards and bush turkeys and whatever else go past. He's
doesn't matter.
Out barking at them.
That's good. It adds character, and I have a heap of birds and stuff around here. I've got 5 acres, but there was not much today, so a dog's good.
Yeah. Well, what an amazing conversation. I really want to thank you, Aaron, for bringing your experience and knowledge and wisdom here in the light. And hopefully, we've brought awareness and light to the situation, because like anything, to keep it in the dark doesn't help anyone.
Agree, absolutely. And, anyone that's listening in, I really thank you for doing so. And if I can help in any way, please reach out. And, the more, as I said, the more conversations we can have like this, the better, because it's only going to help humanity moving forward. Yeah.
And where can people find you, Aaron?
If you Google the Outback Mind Foundation, outbackmind.org.au, you'll see a bit about it on there. And this is, geez, with this, without force, the Outback Mind is starting to move ahead. I'm not an academic that's trying to reach a certain goal with this sort of stuff. I'm just letting this grow organically. But I do know what we do is needed, and it's there for a reason. And I just believe over the next 12 months, things are going to expand a lot more, because what we've discussed today is so important. And if we keep doing things the same way that we've done things, we're not going to get different results. But I think if we can start to turn the corner and do things more proactively and help healing and so forth occur, but also help this mentoring and help diversion, that's where we can start to see significant change in this space. So I guess through my own experience, what my mum went through, and all the things I've observed, it's given me the ability to be able to be really focused on making change in this lifetime, because I think by default we all have a purpose, and if we can find that purpose, then we're going to live a good life and a successful life, and we won't be making decisions which are self-destructive to ourselves or others moving forward. So good. All right. Thank you, Aaron. And, if you're a man out there who is the perpetrator of domestic violence, please take responsibility for your part. No matter what your childhood was like or the system, puts on you, you are ultimately responsible for your actions. And the only way is to take that accountability and take the first steps to healing yourself. And that's it. Yeah, for women in that situation, it's a tough one. You ask yourself why you're staying, and maybe even just to have a temporary break while the man heals himself or takes the first steps to healing himself. You don't have to say it's a forever break. Maybe that will help. Well, that's what happened in my situation, but then it became a forever break, because that gave me the power then to actually, say, well, hang on, I'm actually happier by myself. But yeah, keep working on yourself, keep your vibration high. Everything that Aaron was saying for men, us women have to do too. So, keeping our calm and taking responsibility for the way we might be attacking men when, it's not necessary. So, women need to take part their responsibility for how we are speaking to and maybe lashing out at men, however warranted it is. It's just about being aware and taking responsibility, because it takes two to tango. Even if you're just
just there and you are in that situation, you are still responsible for being in that situation. Why are you there and you're not somewhere else? So it's the women has a responsibility to play in that dynamic as well.
Well said.
Okay. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time on Man Speak. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.